Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is Best in Slot, and in tonight's slightly odd video, we're going to take the original Jurassic Park novel by Michael Crichton, and we're going to translate it via Google Translate into German, and then into Russian, and then into Portuguese, and then finally back into English, although sometimes we'll also use Khmer, which I'm definitely not pronouncing correctly, which is the national language of Cambodia, and every now and again, well just once, Telugu, which is a Indian language, the fourth biggest language in India. Credit to Full Metal Born on Reddit for the idea. Basically what they were doing on the Hearthstone subreddit is the same idea. You translate a Hearthstone card 4 or 5 times and then back into English, and you get some pretty incredible results, some really funny stuff. And I thought we'd try it with Jurassic Park. So I've picked out 5 of my favourite examples. You'd be surprised how often you do this 5 translate or 4 translate step, and it still ends up very similar to the English version, which isn't that funny. So I've made sure I've picked out 5 that I think are really good, including one that just kills me every time I read it. Something a little different tonight. I wanted to make sure just because I got my PC back doesn't mean we're going to stop doing the slightly more odd original content. And let's get started. I really hope you guys enjoy. Quick little thing before we get started. There are obviously going to be spoilers for the Jurassic Park novel here. If you haven't read it yet, you definitely should. But it is about 30 years old now, so I'm not going to worry too much about spoilers. The second thing is I should mention some of these are a little bit violent. The 5th one in particular is pretty brutal. So if you are very averse to violent and it's going to have an effect on you, then you probably shouldn't watch this video, or at least not the last one. Anyway, I'll do another warning before the 5th. Let's get started. So this is the original English version. He had not gone more than 10 feet when one of the compies jumped onto his back. He flung his arms wildly, knocking the animal away, but lost his balance and slid back down the hillside. As he came to a stop, a second compy sprang forward and took a tiny nip from his hand. He looked with horror, seeing the blood flow over his fingers. Now this is actually probably the biggest spoiler. This is actually the death of John Hammond, right towards the end of the book. This is my least favourite of the 5, but it's a chill way to kick things off. So this one got translated 3 or 4 times. Let's see how it ended up. He hadn't walked more than 10 feet when one of the computers jumped on his back. He wildly put his arms around and tossed the animal away, but lost his balance and slid down the slope. When he stopped, the second guy jumped forward and took a small sip from his hand. He looked terrified and saw blood running down his fingers. So not a particularly massive one, I just really like the idea that he's walking up this hill to get away and then a rogue computer comes and launches himself onto him, and then a random guy appears and starts drinking from his hand. They're gonna get weirder. Let's move on to the next one. Grant pulled the air pistol out of his belt. It looked pitifully small in his hands, but there was a chance that, if he shot the animal in a sensitive spot, in the eye or the nose, the Tyrannosaur surfaced beside the boat, opened its jaws and roared. Grant aimed and fired. The dart flashed in the light and smacked into the cheek. The Tyrannosaur shook its head and roared again. So this is when Grant and Lex and Tim, another scene that never made it into the film, but they're going on a river rapids tour sort of thing and getting attacked by the T-Rex at the same time. So let's see, this one I like. So let's get started. First of all, Grant pulled the air pistol from his belt. In his arms, looks pitifully small, but there is a possibility that the Duke could appear next to the boat. Open his mouth and snarl if it threw the animal in a sensitive place, eyes or nose. Grant took the target and fired. An arrow flashed in the light and struck his cheek. Duke No-Saw nodded and nodded again. I don't know how, but Tyrannosaur, when translated 3 or 4 times, ends up as Duke No-Saw. Who I like to imagine is this very... I like to imagine Grant was getting attacked by like a duke, just a guy swimming around in the water, popping up every now and again, and Grant shoots him in the face with a dart gun, basically. Alright, number 3 on our list. And then suddenly the tongue relaxed and uncoiled. Tim felt it slipping off his face. His body was covered in disgusting white foamy slime, and the tongue fell limply to the ground. The jaws slapped shut, biting down on the tongue. Dark blood gushed out, mixing with the mud. The nostrils still snorted in ragged breaths. So this you may recognise a little bit. This was a scene wherein they're hiding in a rocky crevice behind a waterfall. The Rex puts its tongue in and actually grabs Tim with the tongue and then at some point gives up and bites down on its own tongue. We've all been there. Usually not when trying to eat a child, admittedly. Now, what you may recognise about this is that this scene actually got taken from the first novel and got added to the second film instead, wherein rather than the tongue fully wrapping around and pulling someone out, instead we had the scene where the paleontologist has a snake on his shoulder and decides that the snake is scarier than the bloody Tyrannosaurus Rex, so he runs out and gets eaten, because he's a big old dummy. Alright, let's see where this ends up after some translations. And suddenly the tongue relaxed and rolled away. Tim felt it slip out of his face. His body was covered in disgusting white bubbles, and his tongue fell to the floor. That's Tim's tongue, by the way. Jaw closed and bit his tongue. The black blood is opaque and mixed with mud. His nostrils still smell abnormal. I always liked it when the last line was the weirdest one. I've tried to focus on ones where they end with a little bit of an oddball move, you know? Okay, I should warn you then, this is the violent one. I mean, it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's words on a screen, blah, 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 but if you're worried about it, then, you know, it is what it is. Not that they haven't been violent up till this point, but this one is a level above, I would say. And then there was a new searing pain, like a fiery knife in his belly, and Nedry stumbled, reaching blindly down to touch the ragged edge of his shirt, and then a thick, slippery mass that was surprisingly warm, and with horror he suddenly knew he was holding his own intestines in his hands. The dinosaur had torn him open. His guts had fallen out. So this is, of course, the Dilophosaurus attacking Dennis Nedry. Now, the Dilophosaurus in Jurassic Park novel is actually a much larger creature, much more threatening in a lot of ways. It's fairly humongous. Either way, the scene plays out relatively similar to how it does in the film. It's one of the ones that did sort of survive the transition. The majority of the book actually doesn't make the transition at all, but the basic concepts are there. How does this translate? Let's find out. And then there was another sharp pain, like a fire knife, in his abdomen. And Nedry fell and was blinded by the blindness of his shirt. And then there was a thick, slippery mass that was surprisingly hot and terrible. Suddenly he realised he was holding his gut. The dinosaurs are open. His insides fell off. I like that one. That was the only one that used Telugu, which is the 4th most common Indian language. Fun facts with Best in Slot. One more to go, folks. This was my favourite one. It did largely survive the translation, except for one line, which only changes very slightly, but it kills me. I don't know why. Let's get started. Arnold was standing with his back to the maintenance shed. 3 raptors approached him. Arnold had picked up a stick, and he was waving it at them, shouting. The raptors fanned out as they came closer, one staying in the centre, the other 2 moving to each side. Coordinated, smooth. Gennaro shivered. Pack behaviour. So this is towards the end of the book. A lot of the characters who die earlier in the film, they kind of basically all the characters end up getting together at some point in the maintenance shed. You know, Wu is still there at this point, although Wu does die in the book as well. Tons of them get together and they all get sort of hunted down by the raptors. How does it translate? This is the final one. This is my favourite. Arnold's back was turned to the service shed. 3 birds of prey approached him. Arnold raised his cane, waved a hand and shouted. As they approached, the predator spread. 1 remained in the middle, the other 2 moved sideways. Coordinated, soft, soft. Gennaro winced. Packaging behaviour. I don't know why that kills me. This is actually the first one I did. This was my tester one. This is the one that showcased to me that it could work as a concept, basically. And I read packaging behaviour and it just killed me. I just like to imagine that the raptors are like half Amazon shipping crate or something, and this is how the Amazon crates would attack were they ever to rise up against us. Hopefully this is entertaining to anyone, because I find this really amusing, but I'm terrified that nobody else will, basically. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. I really, really enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys did too. We can definitely do this again. There's also a Lost World novel. I could definitely find more lines. We could pick different languages. You know, things could be mixed up a lot. I could definitely find a few more than this and do another video similar to this, but that depends if you guys actually enjoyed it in the first place. So let me know in the comments section down below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. We'll be back tomorrow with more stuff. I have a PC again, so we're going to be working. I'm very excited. We'll also be kicking off Planet Zoo super soon, so keep an eye out for that. Probably Monday, because it takes a little bit of time, but hopefully we'll be back with that super soon if you've been waiting for that as well. Thank you so much for joining me. Big shout out once again to Full Metal Born on Reddit, who I believe came up with the original idea. Someone else had done one that was like a single translation, but they did this multiple translation and back to English, so I haven't really seen it anywhere else or used it outside of Hearthstone, but it's a really cool idea and I'd like to do more on it. We shall see. Thank you so much for joining me. Cheers, much love as always. Bye bye.